Foreign direct investment driving development. Sustainable growth through knowledge transfer. Technology as a solution. Innovation as a way forward. Over 70 ministers, 140 countries, over 500 exhibitors, 8,000 square meters of exhibition, 15,000 businessmen and investors. The annual investment meeting, Sustainable Development through FDI-induced innovation and technology transfer.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, official delegation representatives, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, assalamu alaikum and marhaba. It is indeed a great honor for me today to welcome you to the 5th edition of the annual investment meeting. My name is Rani Ali and I will be your presenter for today. We are gathered here today with you, our partners, at the annual investment meeting, the region's leading economic event focusing on foreign direct investment in emerging markets, under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, Prime Minister, and the ruler of Dubai. I would like to thank the presidents, ministers, ambassadors, foreign dignitaries, as well as the distinguished representatives of the private sector, the global experts, our sponsors, and the media, and the thousands of participants for being here with us today at the annual investment meeting, enriching our deliberations and interactions. It is most rewarding to see so many countries from all around the globe converging to Dubai to attend the 5th edition of the annual investment meeting. With 68 ministers and many delegations from more than 140 countries have honored the United Arab Emirates with their presence, accompanied by large delegation of government, high official, and businessmen and businesswomen. The annual investment meeting is the compass that guides investors from all around the world. Our theme is sustainable development through FDI, induced innovation and technology transfer. Our program this year is full of new features, which is incorporated in our program to match the requirements of international delegations to introduce their key investment opportunities to investors from all over the world. To start our day's proceeding, we would like to launch the annual flagship publication of the annual investment meeting. It will be launched highlighting the general theme of the conference and revealing the latest trends in inward and outward FDI flows globally and regionally, in particularly in growing markets. A special focus will be made on the competitiveness of fast growth markets and key opportunities and challenges they have to face in a fast-moving, unpredictable world. I would like to introduce the presentation of the annual investment meeting FDI report by Dr. Karl Sauvant, Resident Senior Fellow, Columbia Center and Sustainable Investment, a joint center of Columbia Law School and the Earth Institute of Columbia University, USA. Please welcome him to the stage with a big round of applause.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a privilege and pleasure for me to present to you the Annual Investment Report 2015 for this meeting. The report focuses on developments last year, but these developments are being put into a broader context. The focus of the report is on policy developments at the national and international levels. The reason for this focus is that the FDI world last year was characterized by policy developments and discussions. Let me present to you some highlights of the report which is available to you, dealing with the following three issues. First, the performance of foreign direct investment flows last year. Second, a new national FDI policy challenge. And third, international policy challenges in the foreign direct investment field. Let me begin with the performance of FDI flows in 2014. The single most important characteristic of FDI flows last year is that these flows fell by approximately 10%. to $1.3 trillion. However, keep in mind that this amount, $1.3 trillion, is still a very substantial sum. It shows that the FDI market, the world FDI market, remains very vibrant. The decline in flows took place in developed countries, partly explained by economic uncertainty and slow growth in Europe. On the other hand, the good news is that emerging markets did very well. They attracted over half of world FDI flows, almost 60%, in the amount of $750 billion. And they did this for the third year in a row. This is certainly an outstanding achievement, testifying to the economic performance of this part of the world. Asia, in particular, was the most dynamic region in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, with China actually becoming the world's single most important host country last year. West Asia, on the other hand, saw again declining inflows, although different countries performed differently. For example, the United Arab Emirates ranked second in 2013 as the most attractive host, and Dubai alone attracted $8 billion in 2014. Moreover, the United Arab Emirates were the leading outward investor of the region, accounting by itself for more than a quarter of West Asia's total outward FDI stock. It is also important to note that Asia led emerging markets in terms of attracting knowledge-intensive foreign direct investment, as measured by the number of R&D facilities established in the world over the past decade or so. And I'm particularly grateful to Henry Löwenthal for making these data available to me. This is reflected in the fact that the share of emerging markets in the world's total spending for research and development rose from about 10% a decade ago to 40% now. This is an encouraging trend, as technology is a key driver of economic growth and development. The topic of this year's annual investment meeting is therefore rightly sustainable development through foreign direct investment-induced innovation and technology transfer. There is also good news on the outward FDI side. In particular, the share of emerging markets in world outward FDI flows rose to almost 40% in 2013, amounting to about $560 billion. This is an extraordinary performance, considering that FDI outflows from emerging markets 10 years ago were not negligible. What is more, although FDI outflows from emerging markets are concentrated in that a small number of countries account for the lion's share of these outflows, more and more firms in more and more emerging markets are becoming outward investors. More specifically, over the past 5 years, more than half of all emerging markets reported outward FDI flows at least once in 1 year during that period. I estimate that there are today some 50,000 multinational enterprises headquartered in emerging markets. Among these are a number of state-owned enterprises, that are particularly important outward investors in countries such as China, Singapore, and some Arab countries. The rise of multinational enterprises headquartered in emerging markets testifies to the increasing competitiveness of the firms involved. At the same time, by investing abroad, emerging market multinational enterprises further reinforce their own competitiveness as they obtain better access to markets and resources of all kinds. In sum, world FDI flows declined in 2014, but emerging markets did well in attracting investment. In addition, firms headquartered in emerging markets have become important players in the world FDI market. The implication for investment promotion agencies is that, more than in the past, they need to target a broad range of emerging markets when they seek to attract foreign direct investment. Let me turn to my second topic, host country FDI policies. I want to highlight here only one policy area, and this area relates directly to the rise of emerging markets as outward investors. This is the situation. All countries pursue policies to attract foreign direct investment, and they have various instruments in place to implement these policies. The establishment of investment promotion agencies by virtually all countries, and increasingly also by subdivisions in a rising number of countries, testify to this approach. You, as representatives of governments, investment promotion agencies, and as investors, are much more aware of this situation and are much more familiar with policies to attract foreign direct investment than I am. However, when you look at the outward FDI side, the picture is quite different. More specifically, you have a picture that shows that all developed countries have a policy on outward investment and various instruments to implement this policy in order to help their firms invest abroad. The instruments used by governments for this purpose can include the following: providing informational support, giving various types of financial support, granting favorable fiscal treatment, offering investment insurance, linking official development assistance to important FDI projects, negotiating treaties to avoid double taxation, and of course, concluding bilateral investment treaties to protect the investors abroad and facilitate their operations. And in a number of countries, investment promotion agencies are not only responsible for attracting investment to the shores of their countries, but they are also responsible for helping firms of their countries invest abroad. This is indeed a wide range of instruments to help firms invest abroad, and they can be important not only for large firms contemplating outward investment, but especially also for small and medium-sized enterprises. The principal reason for which developed countries help their firms invest abroad is that, as I mentioned already, outward foreign direct investment increases the international competitiveness of firms by providing them with better access to markets and resources of all kinds, ranging from natural resources to technology and brand names. This is a picture as far as developed countries are concerned. As far as emerging markets are concerned, however, there are only a few countries, I repeat, there are only a few countries that have a policy on outward investment and have a number of instruments in place to implement these policies. The best known example is, of course, China and its going out policy. And as part of this going out policy, China's numerous investment promotion agencies also help Chinese firms with their outward foreign direct investment. By the way, China's outward FDI might well surpass China's inward FDI this year. In other words, most emerging markets do not help their firms invest abroad. This is surprising because, as I said earlier, the great majority of emerging markets has firms that invest abroad, and outward investment is an important source of the international competitiveness of firms. What is the implication of this situation? I think the implication is clear. Multinational enterprises headquartered in countries that support their firms invest abroad have a competitive advantage over multinational enterprises headquartered in countries that do not support their firms to invest abroad. I repeat, multinational enterprises headquartered in countries that support the firms to invest abroad have a competitive advantage over multinational enterprises headquartered in countries that do not support their firms to invest abroad. And such support, as I mentioned earlier, can include informational support, financial support, fiscal support, investment insurance, official development assistance, and double taxation and bilateral investment treaties. In other words, many of the 50,000 multinationals headquartered in emerging markets that I mentioned earlier are in a competitive disadvantage in the world FDI market when competing with firms from especially developed countries. What this means, in my opinion, is that a great number of countries need to look at the question of whether or not they too need a policy on outward foreign direct investment and whether or not they need to put instruments in place to implement such a policy. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge of developing an appropriate outward FDI policy is a new frontier of national FDI policy making. At the same time, though, I need to alert you to a challenge that policies to support outward FDI face at the international level. And this brings me to my third topic, international FDI policy challenges. The challenge I'm referring to concerns the support that some governments give to their state-owned enterprises that invest abroad. And, as I mentioned before, state-owned enterprises play an important role in the outward investment of a number of countries. More specifically, a number of developed countries regard the support that home country governments give to their state-owned enterprises investing abroad as violating the principle of competitive neutrality. This principle envisages that no entity in an international market should have undue competitive advantages vis-à-vis its competitors. The negotiations of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement reflect the concern of developed countries in this respect. The resulting agreement is likely to discipline support for state-owned enterprises that are active internationally. I think this is a development that is important for a number of countries, including here in the region, and hence needs to be monitored carefully. But the policy challenges at the international level are broader. The key point here is that the international investment law and policy regime increasingly sets the parameters for national FDI policy making. This is done through more than 3,000 international investment agreements that virtually all countries of the world have concluded. The United Arab Emirates, for example, has signed 59 international investment agreements. These agreements establish the boundaries of what governments can and cannot do nationally in the area of foreign direct investment, including to increase the benefits of foreign direct investment for their national economies. International investment agreements restrict, and that, of course, is the characteristic of all international agreements, the policy space of governments in the area of foreign direct investment. Moreover, the international investment regime has teeth, so to speak. It has an investor-state dispute settlement mechanism that can be used directly by investors that feel that any of their rights under an international investment agreement have been violated by host countries. International tribunals of arbitrators decide then on any claims brought by investors against a host country. The cost of litigation of such claims can be high, on average $10 million, and the awards rendered if a country loses a dispute can be even higher and can reach into the billions of dollars. The number of disputes, moreover, is growing. The international investment law and policy regime is therefore of great importance to national policy making. I do not want to bore you with the details of the international investment regime and its strengths and weaknesses. Suffice it to say that there is a lively debate underway about this regime, about how this regime can and should be reformed. In Europe alone, an invitation of the European Commission for comments on the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism yielded some 150,000 responses last year. This discussion reflects the importance of a solid and balanced investment law and policy regime that takes into account the interests of all principal stakeholders. And this, in turn, makes it important for all governments to monitor this discussion carefully and seek to influence the debate about the future of the international investment regime and the manner in which it sets the boundaries for domestic FDI policy making. Investment promotion agencies have a special responsibility in this respect in the context of exercising their policy advocacy function. Let me conclude my presentation of the report by reminding you that although world FDI flows declined last year, emerging markets did well. The challenges are on the policy front, both at the national and international levels. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Karl, for this very insightful report. And now we will proceed to the Global Leaders Debate. Senior public officials and heads of international institutions and academia representing some major stakeholders of the international investment community will be invited to take part in this very important session. The debate will be focused on the overall theme of the conference, to discuss and share views and lessons learned, as well as present their personal assessment on how to invest in growth and to find sustainable solutions to further the cause of development in times of economic revival. Moderating this session will be Cornelia Mayer, Chairman and CEO of Emerald Corporation. Please welcome her to the stage with a big round of applause.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning. My name is Cornelia Mayer, and I have the honor to chair this session on sustainable development through FDI, induced innovation and technology transfer. It's the Global Leaders Debate. In 2014, the total private capital flows to emerging markets stood at about 550 billion, total FDI at about 1.3 trillion, which we've just learned. FDI is stable and longer term in nature than other forms of investment. It also requires deeper involvement of the investor with the recipient country. FDI is the most sustainable form of investment in terms of longevity and job creation. The nature of the investment is also most conducive to technology transfer due to the direct nature of interaction. Environmental sustainability can be a positive result of an FDI. Let's think of renewable energy, for instance. The panel will highlight the importance of FDI to emerging economies and what it takes from both the investor and recipient countries' perspective to ensure sustainable forms of FDI can be successful and long-term. I have a wonderful honor, and I would like to thank the organizers and the United Arab Emirates government for organizing this and collecting all these wonderful people on this panel. We have, and I'll just quickly introduce them, and then we go directly into the debate. We have, the first speaker will be Her Excellency Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP at the United Nations. I've known Shamshad for a long time. When I worked at the ADB, she was always a great mentor, and she's always been a role model ever since then. We then have His Excellency Mr. Rustam Minikhanov, President of the Republic of Tatarstan, who will speak from Tatarstan is a very vibrant economic area in the Russian Federation, and he will speak from his perspective. We have His Excellency Ambassador Murade Murargi, Executive Secretary of CPLP, which is the Portuguese language speaking association of countries. It's a little bit like the Commonwealth. I'm British, so I try to put everything into systems that I can understand. The Commonwealth for Portuguese countries, it comprises 267 million people and more than 4 million square miles of territory. We then are very pleased to have His Excellency Ambassador John Danilovic, Secretary General of the International Chambers of Commerce. He's a very distinguished former US ambassador to Brazil and other countries, and a shipping entrepreneur and private equity entrepreneur. We have, after that, His Excellency Kande Yumkella, who is Under Secretary General and Special Representative for the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy, CEO of the Sustainable Energy for All Initiative, both of the United Nations. He used to be a Minister of Agriculture in his country, and nobody, I think, understands more about the food, water, energy nexus. I had a short meeting with him yesterday. It was absolutely inspirational. I'm looking to be inspired again today. And then we have somebody who has thought deep thoughts on FDI and especially also reverse innovation, which is Professor Dr. Ravi Mamaruti, who is a distinguished professor at the Damori Kim School of Business and director of the Center of Emerging Markets, both at Northeastern University. So you will agree with me that is a fantastic panel that we have. To the order of business, I will first ask all of our panelists 2 questions. Then we have a very short discussion here, and we'll open it up to all of you to ask your questions. And in the last 5 minutes, I'll do a summation of the 4 or 5 key points that I've heard, so you have something to take with you. So without further ado, Shamshad, when we look at Asia, which is I mean, you've covered the world, but right now you're again in an Asian role. Asia has received the biggest share of FDI. What has made, in your view and with your long-standing experience, Asia so attractive for foreign investors?
Thank you, Cornelia. And at the outset, first of all, let me recognize that this particular AIM initiative sponsored by United Arab Emirates is a very welcome development from United Nations context. As you know, this year is a very unusual year, a unique year, because United Nations member states are launching the next generation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is going to build on the success of the Millennium Development Goals. The key thing is that this year we will be having substantive debates in the next few months to basically have the member states agree on the Sustainable Development Goals and the financing for development arrangements, as well as the climate change agenda will be negotiated towards the end of the year. So having discussions on FDI is extremely timely and is featuring to be a very prominent source of financing for sustainable development. You are absolutely correct. The Asia-Pacific region has remained a favorable destination for FDIs. Even in this post-crisis period of volatility and instability, the Asia-Pacific region now accounts for about 40% of global FDI flows as of the 2013 numbers. And in 2014, the FDI inflows rose by further 15%. But as one may expect, FDI inflows vary substantially across countries and sub-regions. This is due to, of course, the enabling environment prevailing in the host countries, the impact of the regional economic blocs, which is a very promising development. Of course, macroeconomic and financial uncertainties, both at the global and the regional levels, structural constraints, and last but not the least, the geopolitical tensions that some regions or countries face. I think it is important to recognize that Asia-Pacific is a very dynamic hub. So it is no surprise to all of us that it has attracted bulk of the flows. First of all, it's important to recognize that the resilience of the Asia-Pacific stands out, irrespective of the crisis. And if one were to take sub-regional dimension, ASEAN has played a very critical role in transforming the ASEAN bloc, and it is today not only a hub of FDI, but it has been facilitated through the free trade agreements and investment understandings. The establishment of the ASEAN Economic Community also lends us fair degree of optimism that this sub-region will continue to attract more and more FDI flows. In addition to ASEAN, of course, we have the ASEAN +3, and in there, I will single out China. As you know, China is the largest recipient. It has adopted the Going Global strategy, and it has got its sheer size of the market, but also dynamism in the country. In contrast, geopolitical tensions and foreign sanctions imposed against Russian Federation led to 70% fall in FDI as prospective investors were deterred, despite the signs of improved business environment. Recently, FDI inflows in India between While we have had a period of a decline of FDI to India, but I'm quite optimistic with the new leadership, the positive signs for being very pro-business friendly, that this will be offset. To conclude, I would like to reiterate my point that FDI is an extremely important source of funding and financing for development. It is important to note that economies within Asia Pacific have increased their capacities as investors. FDI outflows, which has been just talked about by Karl, is happening very much in the region, about $500 million plus of outflows from the Asia Pacific, benefit a number of countries. And as you may know, 26% of this comes from Japan and 19% from China. So our region with at least 4 or 5 countries is benefiting other smaller economies. In summary, it is really only one factor making a destination attractive or causing shifts in trend, but I would conclude by saying macroeconomic performance, economic growth prospects, structural constraints typically have a bigger influence on FDI flows. Thank you, Cornelia.
Thank you very much. And we're going to your second question, which is sort of, when you look at the FDI, how much was the impact on innovation, on technology, and also, very importantly, as Asia Pacific as a whole, obviously it's a very diverse region, but what would sort of be the key element that you would say, what is the lesson that that Latin America and other places can learn from Asia Pacific?
Okay, I think let me first concentrate on the lessons learned, and it has implications for technology transfer and innovation. First, FDI, as we know, has benefited a number of areas and number of sectors, but it has shied away from particularly large infrastructure and has not promoted sustainable development. So the first lesson for us is that going forward, we need to think more creatively on how to get this right. Second, FDI has flown in substantive amounts, but it has not effectively been leveraged to achieve the transfer of appropriate technology, knowledge sharing, and its diffusion. Third, wherever we've had lack of educated and well-trained, skilled labor force, it has hindered the prospects for FDI. However, there are experiences from our region where, for instance, in Vietnam, when a sample of 58% of foreign-owned firms was looked at, we found that formal training to develop employees' technical skills has, in fact, benefited the country. Intel has sent Vietnamese employees to other Asian facilities to develop managerial and technical expertise of their staff. My fourth point is that liberalized and open trade and investment regime that enter into formal arrangements with multinational corporations and have invested in R&D as well as joint ventures have been able to build up domestic firms' capability and enhance their international competitiveness and opened up countries' access to newer and larger markets. My fifth point is that FDI flow, when it gets in, eventually, when the domestic firms that have attractive investments are able to list on stock exchanges and have eventually resulted in diversified ownership. So more of this trend is a very welcome development. My last point is really that we have to recognize that FDI, in terms of its potential impact on transfer of technology, is very much dependent on how much goes into greenfield investment versus how much goes into M&As, mergers and acquisitions. And recently, with the decline in greenfield FDI, which has an impact, positive impact on transfer of technology, is somewhat worrisome. And in contrast, of course, M&A activities have doubled over 2004 to 2013. So I would very much say that one of the lessons to be learned is to encourage more greenfield investments. I'll stop here in interest of time.
That's very fascinating, very interesting. Thank you, Shamshad. As always, we always, every time I speak to you, I learn. This is brilliant. Thank you. Your Excellency, President Minikhanov, you are representing a very important republic in the Russian Federation. You're representing a very vibrant economic, in terms of industrial base, a very vibrant economy. How important is FDI as a contributing factor to the economy of the Republic of Tatarstan? What are sort of the key sectors where you have received that FDI, and where would you like to focus next?
Большое спасибо за вопрос. Хотел бы поблагодарить участников, организаторов этого форума. Мы ежегодно принимаем участие. Это хорошая возможность показать, рассказать о себе. На самом деле, если взять иностранные инвестиции, Татарстан сегодня является одним из ведущих субъектов Российской Федерации. И основные инвестиции, они шли с Европы, с Турции, с Соединенных Штатов Америки. Мы пока плохо работаем с арабскими странами, с Юго-Восточной Азией. И сегодня мы на это обращаем внимание. Конечно, сегодня очень важно для развития страны, для развития любого региона привлечение инвестиций и качество этих инвестиций. Если взять 5 лет назад, где-то прямые инвестиции из общей совокупности, они составляли 20-30%. Сегодня это уже 70-80%. Это говорит о том, что, во-первых, инвестор в нас поверил, во-вторых, мы создаем те условия, которые позволяют инвестору очень быстро начать свой бизнес. Я хочу сказать, что здесь роль государства очень важна. Во-первых, роль федерального правительства, те задачи, которые мы ставим для привлечения инвестиций, конечно же, необходимо создать тот климат и ту законодательную базу, чтобы инвестор в нас поверил. Я считаю, что сегодняшний день, в Российской Федерации созданы прекрасные условия, и налоговый режим, и инфраструктурные вопросы. Я имею в виду, мы сегодня очень активно создаем особые экономические зоны, индустриальные парки, технопарки. Это является неким катализатором, чтобы инвестор очень быстро вписался в эту работу. Второе – это центр ответственности, чтобы инвестор не ходил, не искал, не обращался, прямо пришел к центру ответственности Республики Татарстан. Это агентство инвестиционного развития, и оно сопровождает любой проект, который касается и который будет реализован в республике, оказывает консультации, оказывает содействие. Второе – инфраструктурно. Вот особые экономические зоны, индустриальные парки – это полностью подготовленные площадки, где есть вся система и электроснабжения, газоснабжения, водоснабжения. И самый главный вопрос, здесь тоже об этом говорили, наличие кадров. Мы на себя берем вопросы подготовки специалистов, создаем ресурсные центры, которые, конечно же, очень важны. Если взять структурно, конечно же, для нас очень важно, чтобы появились те производства, которые или слабо представлены, или нацелены на импортозамещение и на экспорт продукции. Мы в этом направлении сегодня очень активно работаем. И я считаю, что несмотря на все сложности, которые сегодня есть с доступом к инвестициям для российских компаний, но интерес иностранных инвесторов к России не угасает. Многие, вот я могу привести пример, особой экономической зоны Алабуга. Вот мы 2 дня назад открыли большой завод с участием, который был построен турецким инвестором. В ближайшие, вот этот год еще 7 заводов будет построено. То есть есть четкие, хорошие примеры и есть полная поддержка как на федеральном уровне, так и на уровне регионов. Мы приглашаем всех наших партнеров, которые здесь, которые меня слышат. Во-первых, я приглашаю на наш стенд. Мы здесь представили стенд, где мы конкретно могли бы рассказать о тех проектах, которые сегодня мы реализуем, и о тех планах, которые мы хотим реализовать в будущем. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. I have a second question for you, Your Excellency, which is when you look at, you've given us all the hard, the hard infrastructure, the techno parks, and all of those good things. How important do you find that, sort of policy frameworks are? How do you coordinate with the center, with the Russian Federation? And also in terms of innovation, how much innovation have you actually gained from the investment, like the Turkish investment, for instance?
Ну, что касается, мы вообще, я уже сказал, что в основном нацелены на то, чтобы эти проекты были в машиностроительной нашей отрасли, особенно автомобильной отрасли. Наши нефтехимические проекты – это проекты по переработке. И если взять вот турецкие компании пришли на производство автокомпонентов, которых у нас нет. Они пришли на производство и переработку древесных изделий. Это тоже, они не только на российский рынок работают, также и работают на экспорт. Это стекольное производство, которое сегодня в России не хватало. Это и строительное стекло, и автомобильное стекло. То есть сегодня очень важно инвестиции еще в нефтехимию. Татарстан является одним из крупнейших производителей нефтехимической продукции в России. И нам важно, чтобы инвестор пришел к нам. Наличие сырья углеводородного, наличие необходимых энергоресурсов, наличие инфраструктуры позволяет инвесторам быстро, за короткое время реализовывать вот эти проекты. То есть проекты инновационного плана, экспортно ориентированные или проекты, которые связаны с импортозамещением.
Thank you very much. We've just learned a lot. I would like to turn over now to His Excellency Ambassador Murad Murargi, who is, as we said, the Executive Secretary of the CPLC. And you have interesting countries in there. You have Brazil in there. You have very diverse countries. You have Angola, Mozambique. You have very, very diverse, Portugal, very diverse countries. When you look at the whole, at all of the countries there, what role has FDI played in the development of your member country economies?
Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers. First of all, I would like to thank the government of United Arab Emirates to invited us to this important gathering. As you said, Madam, I'm representing a CPLP, which is the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries, which is composed with 6 countries in Africa, one in Asia, one in Europe, and then another one in South America, which is Brazil. I would like to combine the two questions we have put forward, and because these are two related questions. There is a great deal of diversity among our countries, and obviously asymmetric aspects, mostly in terms of economies. Having said that, and notwithstanding this diversity, which is a characteristic of our countries, I would like to highlight the fundamental role that foreign direct investment can play as a driving force for growth in each of our countries, and without exception. Foreign direct investment flows directed to our countries are huge and have been growing since 2009 at an annual average of rate of 9%. In the last 4 years, it rose at the rate of 13%. Brazil, Portugal, and Mozambique are countries that have attracted more FDI. all of our countries have experienced positive values of FDI. This is the first conclusion that CPLP is a pole of FDI attraction. The challenge facing our countries calls for the implementation of public policies to improve the economic and business environment and reduce investor risk in order to attract more foreign investments. FDI, combined with our natural resources and human capital of our countries, has allowed the creation of internal endogenous factors of development and has leveraged our economic growth, either by strengthening the ongoing activities, such as exploration of hydrocarbons, tourism, or more importantly, through the diversification of the productive sectors. It generates employment and enables the middle class of our countries to do the consumption. Due to the high concentration of FDI in the energy sector, the technology transfer and innovation has been instrumental in preparing the industry and for its implementation. The countries with a more skilled labor force, as is the case of Brazil and Portugal, FDI has allowed not just a significant upsurge in innovation, particularly in areas of telecommunications, machinery and electrical equipment, auto industry, computers, health equipment, among others, but also and above all, it has reduced its dependence on governmental budgets and public policies, allowing it to associate with high levels of research and development through the investing companies' subsidiaries. The key factor is to get investment companies to internalize in the receiving state the quest for innovation. Having said that, the foreign investment that our countries are seeking for has to go beyond a source of funding and must give priority to new projects from the ground, bringing up technology and new markets as well financing. All this within the framework of advanced organizational systems. It is essential that the FDI can add innovation transfer through local subcontracting of intermediate goods and services. However, the enormous potential that both the FDI as well trade exchanges can bring to the community needs to take hold, taking advantage of a shared common heritage, which is language, cultural values that converge not only in terms of economic and consumption patterns, but also in terms of the relevant legislation of our legal systems, such as the commercial, tax, and customs legislation. After all, despite it is not contiguous geography, the CPLP countries are united by strong neighborhood relations that can greatly contribute to closer relations, and it is, in this particular case, the needed trust with the FDI requires. It is precisely here, as a facilitator and unifying organization, the CPLP should have a prominent role as a promoter of favorable conditions to the increased flows, the improvement of the business environment, the training and mobility of human capital, in short, the growth of the states.
Thank you so much, and thank you for combining the two questions. You were ahead of the curve. I understand why people want to invest in your countries. You anticipate in advance. Now we are going to the flip side of the story. We've heard from countries, from international organizations on regulatory frameworks, what it takes, where they've been successful. Ambassador Danilovic, you have been a very, very successful businessman in your own right, and you are now Secretary General of the ICC. So, in your view, what are your member companies looking for when they're investing in emerging economies? What policies need to be in place when for them to be willing to transfer technology? You know, I'm thinking especially in terms of intellectual property and things like that. And how much of technology are they willing to develop outside of their home market? You know how much, like GE has this development center in India. So how much are they willing to do outside of the country, and where are their concerns, especially, again, intellectual property, because that's the biggie for companies. Ambassador Danilovic, over to you.
Thank you, Cornelia. Thank you, Cornelia. There are, of course, many factors that affect business investment decisions, but we hear again and again from our members the repeated theme of stability, predictability, and transparency. In this context, I want to focus on one specific issue which has proved highly controversial in recent months, specifically the role of bilateral investment treaties, BITs, and the role that these treaties play in promoting FDI flows and technology transfer and providing that transparency, stability, and predictability. The debate on investment protection, and more specifically on investor-state arbitration, continues to receive unprecedented attention in many countries around the world. For too long, BITs, bilateral investment treaties, have been viewed as too technical to warrant any form of mainstream attention. But to have any utility, the public debate on investment protection needs balance, and more fundamentally, a clear sense of reality. We've seen scarcely little of that in recent months. I was particularly struck by one columnist in the international press who wrote recently that investor-state rules are used by big business to strike down laws that impinge on their profits, such as tougher financial rules and stronger standards on water pollution and public health. This comment is symptomatic of what many have been of the highly myopic debate on BITs. What has been missing, and what the International Chamber of Commerce, as the World Business Organization, is actively seeking to redress, is the debate about the role of foreign investment in promoting jobs and growth, and moreover, the measures governments can usefully take to promote foreign direct investment. That's one of the reasons why I was delighted to be able to join this event this week. The reality is that when we speak to our members, BITs are widely cited as playing a key role in helping countries attract FDI. This is particularly true of developing countries, for whom inward investment is a vital driver of GDP growth and jobs. It's also hard to understand why these investments agreements have come to such criticism in recent months. You heard me speak earlier about the view that these agreements give companies carte blanche to sue governments to challenge policies they don't like. But the reality is really quite different. For instance, very few investment claims are brought each year. Less than 300 claims were filed in 2013, and of those cases that have been brought to date, the large proportion have been settled in favor of the host states. What's more, investors cannot use investment agreements to bring a claim against a state just because their profits might be affected by new government policy. These agreements only kick in the rare but serious situations where government assets are expropriated without proper compensation. But we also need to ensure that policymakers understand that these agreements have played a key role since the 1960s in supporting FDI flows and promoting good governance. My concern is that the current distorted debate in Europe and the United States in particular risks encouraging more governments to terminate their existing bilateral investment treaties and also discouraging them from entering into new ones. That would be seriously a retrograde step for the international investment climate, and I hope that you will support our efforts to promote a more balanced debate on this agenda in the months ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's excellent. I have a second question for you, and it goes back, and I'm honing back into this whole intellectual property debate, because a lot of companies are sometimes unwilling to invest in certain countries if they feel they're bleeding technology, if they feel that they put something in there and then there's lots of copycats and then. So how do your companies look at that, and what safeguards should countries take so they actually get this technology?
Intellectual property is certainly a vital factor when considering investments and establishing new business relationships. A large number of our International Chamber of Commerce say that they see an extensive risk of IP infringement in emerging markets when engaging suppliers and agents and business partners. Our members, of course, take steps to protect their IP assets. they are also reliant on the measures taken by governments and other businesses in their supply chains. In this context, I'd like to highlight two key issues. The first is the need to build a better understanding amongst policymakers of the role IP protection plays in facilitating investment and technology transfer. We've seen a lot of anti-IP rhetoric in recent UN talks on climate change and sustainable development, most notably in the form of proposals to invoke compulsory licenses for key technologies. In this context, we need to be much clearer on how robust IP protections promote FDI flows and the spread of critical technologies. It's vital that governments view IP as a tool for collaboration, innovation, and knowledge sharing. In my view, the message is clear. Forcing companies to license their technologies can only get you so far because successful technology transfer ultimately requires a sharing of tacit knowledge and the development of collaborative long-term relationships. Robust IP frameworks are a vital foundation for doing just that. The second point is that we need to have a broad conception of intellectual property in discussions like these. There's often a risk of associating IP solely with patents, trademarks, and copyright. But the reality is that trade secrets are often crown jewels of a firm's intellectual capital, developed over many years of experience and trial and error. ICC estimates that trade secrets encompass around 70% of the value of a company's intellectual assets. What's worrying is that our members tell us that they are increasingly vulnerable to the theft of their confidential business information. This is in large part due to growing cybersecurity risks. The WIPO TRIPS agreement provides for protection of trade secrets, and this is an important building block. But right now, national approaches to protecting trade secrets vary greatly, which causes real problems for companies operating in an environment where information and data flows are global. We welcome efforts to harmonize protections for trade secrets in Europe, but much more needs to be done on an international level to harmonize and strengthen these protections and to make them fit and purposeful for the digital age. This is an issue which we're working on as an absolute priority. If you're interested in learning more about what we at the International Chamber of Commerce are doing in this regard, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'd be very happy to hear from you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Cornelia.
that's brilliant, actually, and I'm just adding something. You have this wonderful arbitration mechanism, which is a very helpful tool. But we are going on now, and we are talking energy and sustainability, and we're all looking forward, Under Secretary Jumkela, to be inspired by you, as you inspired me yesterday. So you are uniquely placed to talk environmental sustainability. How much has FDI contributed globally to developing renewable sources of energy in emerging economies? Can you quantify it by region?
Well, first of all, let me put it in context. Thanks for inviting me to this forum. Your forum is taking place at a crucial time as we debate in New York how to finance the new Sustainable Development Goals or the new post-2015 agenda. There is an interesting debate there. Some people are arguing that it has to be through aid money. Well, if you want transformative change, you have to look at FDI and also public-private partnerships. This is, in fact, more crucial in the case of energy systems. We have launched the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, and that initiative now has created a new goal number 7 in sustainable development. Goal number 7 is ensuring sustainable, affordable, reliable energy services for all. And this region where we sit will account for most of the increase in demand in energy going forward. And in that respect, FDI will be crucial. If you take renewables, in 2013, we saw a total investment of $214 billion in renewable energy. A lot of that came from private investments. We saw in developing countries investments of $93 billion in the renewable energy sector. In developed countries, about $122 billion. But some of that is also government money. And it comes back to the point raised by our colleague who addressed the issue of regulations. FDI will not come into energy systems if you don't have stable, predictable public policy. This is going to be crucial. These are long-term investments in most countries. Emerging economies like South Africa over the last 2 years saw $10 billion in their energy sector, particularly in renewable energy, because they had a clear strategy for renewable energy services, legislation, investment protection, and so on. But we see the same happening in other countries, India, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, but a lot of interest now in Latin America. Latin America is emerging as an important location for FDI, for renewable energy in particular. Going forward, I think that we are going to need more innovations in risk management. There's a lot of unpredictability in energy markets. We could not predict the shale revolution. We could not even predict that energy prices will drop below $60 a barrel for oil, which has created its own dynamics in the market. So going forward, to attract FDI in emerging economies in the energy sector, we're going to need a lot of innovation on risk management and risk mitigation instruments, partial guarantee schemes, smarter public-private partnerships. In some cases, you will need subsidies as well. I know people don't like talking about subsidies, either rationalization of subsidies or, in fact, introducing some subsidies for a given period, maybe 5 years, to encourage market development in new energy systems in emerging economies. So I want to emphasize here a public policy, predictability and stability of those policies, but also policies for risk management and risk mitigation.
Well, never have more truer words been spoken. As you know, I come from the energy sector, and risk management, boy, do we need it. The other question that I have for you is in terms of FDI. How much do you think, in terms of technology transfer, how much has sort of sustainable energy sources and investment in them contributed to technology transfer? And especially, how do you look at South-South technology transfer? These days, when I think renewable energy, I very much, in terms of development of technology, think China, because they're absolutely starting to be leading in it.
Of course, China is the leading producer and major demand center for new renewable energy technologies, particularly solar PV and also wind. But we see quite a bit of innovation taking place also in places like India. In Brazil, part of it is adaptation of technology, renewable energy technologies elsewhere in their own economies. So going forward, you will need quite a bit of technology transfer, but that's tied to the investment itself. The old debate about technology transfer from north to south, I don't think is entirely valid here. It's purely about investments. If you create a good market condition, some of what has been mentioned by my colleagues here, the investment comes with technology built in. Of course, for bigger emerging economies, their interest is also local content. To what extent can they produce domestically some of the components of renewable energy technologies in their own economies? There's a big interest in that. I think going forward, you need innovation alliances to drive down the cost of renewables even faster, drive down the cost of storage systems that would in fact be the most disruptive technology in future energy systems. So innovation alliances between countries, maybe as part of their bilateral investment trade agreements. Also, innovation alliances between public research centers and private research entities for creating new kinds of materials, particularly for energy storage and also reducing transmission losses in energy systems, or for that matter, creating smart grids. You need quite a lot of creative systems for creating these kinds of partnerships to ensure more FDI going particularly into research and development. Let me take this opportunity to say hello to Mr. President for Tatarstan. I visited his country 4 years ago, visiting some of his industrial estates when I was Director General of UNIDO. It's great to see you again. I hosted you also in Vienna a few years ago, just before you took your office.
That is wonderful. I see everybody here has some connections to some panelists, which makes it so much nicer and easier to chair a panel if they're all friends. Now we are going to Professor Ravi Ramamurthy, and you have thought long and deeply, and it's your job as a professor to think and analyze. And so my first question to you is, what are the key factors, in your view, to enable FDI to generate technology transfer and innovation? Is it recipient country policy, recipient country soft and hard infrastructure, corporate outlook of the companies who invest, policies of the investors? Do you have empirical data to sort of back up your views on this?
Thank you very much. Being the last speaker on the panel, I think I can start by saying I agree with a lot of what has been said before. I will not repeat what has already been covered. I think the most important thing companies look at when they go to a host country is, in terms of innovation, is what is the quality of the human capital, and that's come up several times. What is the cost of that human capital? And that evolves and changes over time, so they constantly have to reevaluate where they are doing what. And then they want to look at the IP environment, the protection of intellectual property and the enforcement of those property rights. Those are, I think, the key factors at the national level, along with the general political stability, policy stability, and the rate of growth of the country. If a country is growing fast, companies will put up with a lot of grief and a lot of hassles. So it's very important also to maintain a macroeconomic environment in which growth is going to be high. But in the spirit of being provocative, which is, I think, what you want us to do on this kind of panel, I want to suggest that our thinking about this whole issue is a little outmoded in the following sense. When we think of how does FDI induce technology transfer or innovation, what the view we have is that of the foreign company, the multinational, coming into the emerging markets, starting operations, transferring technology into those operations, and then some technology spilling over into the rest of the economy because of their buying and selling relationships within the local economy. I think that was a good and complete view of this phenomenon 20 or 30 years ago, when most of these countries were relying on inward FDI to produce the technology transfer and the innovation process. When I began my career in the 1980s, for instance, only 2% of the world's total FDI originated in the developing countries. As Karl Sauvant told us earlier in this morning, today almost 40% of the world's FDI is originating in the emerging markets. And a lot of this FDI is driven, not all of it, but a lot of it is driven by the motivation of how to gain technology by going abroad. So many companies now in the emerging markets are going abroad to bring back technology. And so the technology transfer and the innovation that occurs through this outward FDI is something we haven't talked much about, which I think is becoming very, very important. So when you talk about R&D labs, yes, it's wonderful when GE creates an R&D lab in India or in Brazil, but it's also interesting that many of these new multinationals from the emerging markets have got many R&D labs abroad. Chinese companies and Indian companies may have 15, 20, or even 30 R&D labs, very often in the advanced countries. And these are very important avenues for transfer of technology. So I think in an age in which 40% of the FDI is originating from the emerging markets, in an age in which the outward FDI from emerging markets is almost 60% of the inward FDI into the emerging markets, in an age in which a country like China has the same amount of outward FDI as it has inward FDI, I think it's very important that we also think about policies by which companies can be more successful in using outward FDI as a way to bring in innovation and technology transfer. And similarly, the government policies, and this is certainly something Karl touched on earlier as well, how can governments use outward FDI policies as a way to stimulate the development and acquisition and transfer back to the home country of technologies?
Yeah, that is very, very true. And can you just, I know you have, and you've sort of talked about it just now, but I know you are sort of the creator of the term reverse innovation. Can you quickly, very quickly, tell us your definition of reverse innovation? Because I will then have a question to everybody that will build on that.
Well, I think this is a second assumption that we need to examine. The first assumption is the point I made earlier, which is that tech transfer and innovation happens because of inward FDI. I think we need to change that and say the assumption now is it happens both through inward FDI and outward FDI. The second assumption that I think we need to think about is the notion that innovation mainly happens in the advanced countries and then trickles down to the emerging markets or the developing countries. I think that is very important. I think that still happens. But increasingly, we are going to see, and we're already seeing, innovations that first are adopted in the emerging markets and then will spread to other emerging markets and sometimes even spread to developed countries. This is what we call, in some of my research, we've called reverse innovation. It's reverse only because since the Industrial Revolution, most of the technology flows have gone from rich countries to poor countries. We are now, I think, in a period in which we're going to see innovation starting in poor countries and going up to rich countries. Now, these innovations are not necessarily of the same kind that come from the rich countries to the poor countries. We, again, have a bias, I think, to think of innovation and equate it with patents. And we think if you don't patent something, you don't have a valuable innovation. Most of the innovations I'm seeing coming out of the emerging markets are about process innovations. They may not even be patentable in many cases. So think of a company like Bharti Airtel in India, which has made telephone service affordable to the masses. I think if the telephone industry, the wireless telephony industry, had been completely dominated by just the multinational companies like Verizon and Vodafone, today in India, perhaps 50 million people would enjoy telephone service. Thanks to the innovation of local companies like Bharti Airtel, 700 million people are enjoying those innovations. Similarly, we have examples of companies in that industry in the Middle East that have played a very important innovative role. So what I'm suggesting is, let us not underestimate the value of innovations that companies in emerging markets can produce for other emerging markets and, in fact, for the whole world. And specifically, if you want to talk about sustainability in terms of inclusiveness, it is these local companies very often that have found very clever ways to dramatically bring down the cost of many products and services, not by 10%, but by 90%, and making products so much cheaper that it actually opens up these markets, these products, to the masses. And these kinds of innovations, I think, are very valuable, not only in other emerging markets, but increasingly also in the developed countries where there is a growing population segment because of income inequality increasing, that are also looking for value for money products. So I think it's going to be a very interesting world in the future in which innovations flow in both directions, from rich to poor countries and poor to rich countries.
Thank you so much, Professor. I'm now going to take the privilege, I will in a second open it to all of you for questions, but I'm going to take the chair's privilege and link two things that, one thing that's very dear to my heart, which is, employment, and as somebody here said, middle classes. If we want sustainable economies, sustainable countries, we need stable middle classes and we need jobs. And especially I'm now talking about this region, we need in the region of 100 million jobs over the next decade to accommodate the youth bulge, all the young, wonderful young people that have been born into the countries of the Middle East and North Africa. And in that sense, I would like to ask you in terms of FDI, innovation, employment opportunities. How important do you think that is? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the participants to just say 2 sentences, because then we can open it, but just to give us that on our way. Shamshad, we start with you.
Well, theoretically, FDI has a potential to, and I'm going to stick to the employment, has a potential to stimulate employment, job generating. But as we know, empirical evidence indicates that bulk of the employment is generated in the small and medium enterprises. So I think one needs to really attract more and more FDI flows into the small and medium enterprises would be my take going forward. And second, of course, FDI historically has gone into extractive industries which are not job generating. And we know the saga about its political economy of the extractive industries. So I would say FDI needs to be diversified, and FDI, as I have pointed out, has a potential to boost the skills and training, and it's really an interaction at that level that is needed with the FDI providers to do so. And I think this emerging market relationship is an important one. As you know, Asia Pacific has been a hub for vertical integration and horizontal integration of production structures. And intra-FDI has had a beneficial impact in not only improving the intra-regional trade, but it also has had a potential for job generation within Asia-Pacific region.
I think I'd quickly go to Ambassador Danilovic.
Kickstarts the local economy and stimulates creativity and innovation. You know, we all know that large businesses all started out as small businesses. From Silicon Valley, where I'm from in California, you know the mythology of that all these companies started in a garage. Well, companies have to start somewhere. So foreign direct investment acts as a direct stimulus to job creation, to creativity, to innovation, and is a must. Combined with things like what the World Trade Organization is doing with regards to Trade Facilitation Agreement, a direct increaser of jobs and GDP.
Your Excellency, President Minichanov, you have also a young population. You have a pretty young population. So how do you look at foreign investment as an employment creator and innovation as an employment creator?
Я считаю, что то, что вы сегодня сказали о занятости, вообще для нашей страны, для Российской Федерации очень важно сформировать средний класс, потому что мы в рыночных условиях живем больше 20 лет. И то, что у нас среднего класса нет, это как бы минус. Каким образом это можно сделать? Конечно же, это малый и средний бизнес. И для этого мы должны создавать условия, то есть он сам по себе не появится. Это и законодательная база, это и инфраструктура для развития малого и среднего бизнеса. Но и крупный бизнес, он должен оказывать содействие, потому что продукцию, которую они производят, дальнейший передел, или компоненты, которые нужны для крупного бизнеса, это тоже малый и средний бизнес. Я считаю, что вот эта работа очень важна, и государство здесь должно принимать активное участие.
Thank you very much. It's really where it's at. And just also a quick answer to Shamshad with the extractive sectors. The extractive sectors themselves don't create the jobs, but the field services, you know, oil field services, the service industries, the Schlumbergers, the Halliburtons, and the local companies, they create, inshallah, some jobs. So have to defend our industries. Undersecretary Keller, I mean, you are dealing with development goals. We want to get young people employed. Can I get 2 sentences from you on this?
I believe we have to do much more on the job creation side. I see my brother sitting next to me here. Mozambique and Tanzania are the big attraction now for investments in oil and gas and other extractive sectors. Africa needs a lot of jobs. We will add another 1 billion Africans in the next 35 years to this planet, 1 billion more. It will be the most populous continent. So you can imagine the challenge of job creation. And there's a lot of FDI coming in. It's coming into the extractives. We see growth rates like 9%, 15%, but it's not reflected yet in jobs. So in the African emerging economies, job creation has to be one of their number one priorities given the youth bulge and the expanding population growth. That will create also markets for consumer products going forward. So economic diversification, job creation will be crucial for African emerging markets.
I think in the interest of time, because we're running a little bit late and there is an opening ceremony happening reasonably soon, I will now open the floor up to our esteemed participants of the conference, to the delegates. Can you please, three things. Show of hand, introduce yourself, your affiliation, your organization, and only one question, no statements, short, crisp questions, so we can all benefit from the wonderful wisdom we have collected here on the panel.
To Madam Shamshad Akhtar, as well as ICC President, should there be a mechanism that we focus on developing countries, especially like Africa continent, and bring the FDI on the basis of what has been consumed in such countries. For example, three or four companies in US were sitting on billions of dollars of cash pool as well as valuations. So should there be a linkage to from where they have made money and also invest in those countries? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Shamshad, you start.
Sure, a very short answer in interest of time. I think it's important to recognize that FDI flows are private flows. So you can't really pick up the money and say it goes there. Ultimately, FDI is also about profit orientation. Of course, there is a social responsibility attached to it, which more and more private entrepreneurs that are investing in different hubs are playing a role. The key to me for the developing countries is to create the right enabling environment. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in low-income developing countries on that front, and also to create a very business-friendly environment. The cost of doing business is still quite high in certain economies, and I'm not going to go into the political uncertainties that exist, which of course makes it more difficult to attract FDI. But we at United Nations, particularly the Regional Commission that I represent, are working with developing countries to help on that front, but also a lot of multilateral development banks are playing a role, and also bilateral assistance can serve to do so. So I think just helping out developing countries create an enabling policy environment, macroeconomic stability, as somebody said, predictability, transparency, and all those are more essential elements to get things right.
Ambassador Danilovic.
I wholly endorse and agree with what you just said in that regard with regards to foreign direct investment, so I agree with that.
Excellent. Maybe Professor Ramamurthy has...
Sorry, I actually don't. I'll pass on this one.
Question was, how do you really attract FDI for the developing countries? Is there a formal mechanism that could be adopted for it? And my take was that policy environment is key to it.
Right. I think I agree with you that the policy environment is very important. I think the implied in the question from the participant was whether the foreign direct investment can bring more benefits to the host countries. And can the companies somehow share with the host countries where they create the value rather than expropriate it and move it somewhere else? And I think that's a fair expectation. More and more I hear multinational companies, and I'm thinking now US companies with which I'm more familiar, that they're beginning to recognize that a long-term strategy for them is actually to think of themselves as partners with the local countries, the host countries, in economic development. And individual deals should flow from some concept of how can a foreign company help in the economic development of the host country. And I think if they see it as a partnership and a win-win, potentially a win-win situation, I think they can contribute more to the host countries.
Ambassador Murargi would like to also share his wisdom. So this question clearly resonated with everybody. Well done for the delegate.
I would like to say this, as an emerging country or a developing country, to attract foreign direct investment in our countries, it's important the political stability. The judicial system to working very well, and the rule of law, because otherwise no country can invest or no investor can come if there's no stability in the country. This is a very important one. Thank you very much.
I'm from Angola, the National Agency for Private Investment. My question is to Ambassador Murad. I would like to know how much, what was the investment, foreign investment in Mozambique and Portugal. Angola attracted $9 billion outside of the oil sector. Thank you.
This is a very difficult question to answer just now, because there's a lot of figures which we have to compare. But anyway, in Angola or in Mozambique, for instance, the FDI has doubled, rising to more or less $5.9 million in Mozambique. During 2013, and in Portugal, I have no figures from Portugal, but in Angola, I think is the investment between 2011 and 2012. Portugal was one of the main investors in Angola. Portugal, it was main investor in Angola with $489 million in Angola. So these figures are more or less have to figure it. So it's very difficult to in a few minutes to answer this question.
Thank you very much.
شكرا لدولة الإمارات. أشكرك سيدتي على إدارة هذه الجلسة. لا يمكن أنه يصير استثمار بدون وجود الطبقة الوسطى. تحدثتم عن الطبقة الوسطى. دائما الطبقات الوسطى هي استقرار لكل دولة، وعندما تستقر أي دولة يستقر الإقليم ويستقر العالم. وشكرا. أرجو التركيز على الطبقة الوسطى وشكرا.
Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Iyad Abu Haltam. I'm from Amman Chamber of Industry. Actually, Jordan has passed recently a new investment promotion law last October, and we were brainwashed that all investments should be inflow into Jordan. I have two questions. First of all, how can you convince public opinion that also the investment commission has to also protect the Jordanian investors going abroad rather going or to attract inflow investment? This is the first question. Second question, does this case, and this question to Professor here, does Jordan, or the case of Jordan is applicable that outward investment is very good to technology transfer and technology diffusion? Thank you.
And it's the lady.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Astrid Chedid, and I'm from the government of the state of Mexico. I would like to ask all the participants, what should investment promotion agencies in Latin America do in order to take advantage of the business opportunities in this region of the world?
You need to address to one participant. We don't have time for this for everybody. Which of the participants would you like to answer?
For the ICC.
Okay, good.
You.
And let's give the gentleman of Oman, and that will be the last question. The gentleman just behind you. And that will sadly be the last question because I see activity there. We will have the official opening soon. So, sir, your identification, one question.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أنا أحمد من موريتانيا مجموعة الخط الآمن. سؤالي هو حول تشجيع ثقافة رواد الأعمال أو ما يسمى بالإنجليزي entrepreneurs. هل الاستثمار المباشر ياخذ في الاعتبار تشجيع أن نعمل العالم كله مواطنين رواد أعمال entrepreneurship؟ لأنه لو نظرنا للشركات اللي مسيطرة اليوم على العالم كلها بدأت من اللي هو رواد الأعمال. وشكرا.
That's a very good question. So I would say we start with the question from the Jordanian gentleman on his investment agency and the importance of also protecting the Jordanian outward investment. And there's no better person to answer that than Professor Ramamurthy.
I do think it's politically difficult to explain sometimes why outward FDI can be good for the home country, because people can see you're sending capital abroad and it's capital that might have been used at home to create jobs. However, when companies from the home country become strong internationally, they actually do produce a lot of benefits for the home country. This is why I think it's very important to create strong domestic companies, much more important than attracting foreign investment, in my opinion. Now, bringing foreign investment is one way to develop strong domestic companies, but ultimately producing strong domestic companies, companies that will do a lot more for the growth of the local economy. Local companies are more likely to invest locally. Local companies are more likely to do fundamental research locally. Local companies are more likely to buy inputs from local companies. So they have a much deeper connection to the local economy. If foreign technology can help improve their global competitiveness, if foreign technology can improve their standing in the domestic market, that is, if they get technology from abroad and use it for meeting the needs of the domestic market, all of that has tremendous value for the local economy. But I know it's a little hard to explain sometimes.
And Shamshad would like to answer this question as well.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think in a number of countries, any outward FDI flows have to seek approvals from the regulators. So if a country wants to promote outward FDI flows, and in a positive way, the key is to work with regulators to explain the position. I can tell you from my experience at the Central Bank of Pakistan, I was very pro allowing permission to the banks to be able to invest overseas, because it's a win-win situation at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm lumping the last two questions together and give them to Ambassador Danilovic in the interest of time, because I see there's activity going on here and we probably need to wrap up. So the first one is the question from the lady from Mexico. What does she have to do to get investment into Mexico? And then also the question on entrepreneurship, because you are representing the private sector here. Entrepreneurs tend to be private sector people.
It comes back to the three key watchwords for foreign direct investment, for free trade, and for international commerce. Those three watchwords are stability, predictability, and transparency. And those can be established primarily through multilateral trade agreements. In the case of Mexico, of course, there is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and also incorporating CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement. Those are critical agreements which were very important for establishing all of those factors: predictability, stability, and transparency in terms of harmonization of regulations and trade promotion. In addition, it's important to have the rule of law, a legal framework, an independent judiciary, which can guarantee the right of companies and corporations involved in cross-border trade to be assured that they can conduct their business in a correct way. TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is now under negotiation, and I think has every likelihood of being concluded by the end of the year, is also very critical. It includes Mexico, the United States, and several other countries in the Pacific Rim. And so that's also extremely important. With regards to entrepreneurship, and particularly with regards to youth, the youth the youthful population of Dubai, of UAE in general, of Saudi Arabia, of the European countries, of the Asian countries, is enormous, and they are the future. The sooner that we can incorporate the imagination and the creativity and the enthusiasm and the energy of the youth market with regards to entrepreneurship, the earlier they can be advised and informed and educated in this regard, the better off it will be for all of us. So entrepreneurship and youthful encouragement is key.
And I will, in a second, I will start with the wrap-up now, as I see the activity going on. What we've learned today is in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, without FDI, they cannot be achieved. So we do need FDI. We need enabling environments, and there we have stability, predictability, and transparency. FDI should do a lot of sort of green fields and really also focus on the small and medium sector, because that's where the jobs are created, and all in all, we need a lot of jobs. Then in order to enable FDI, again, we should not forget that intellectual property is incredibly, incredibly important, and governments should see intellectual property protection actually as a tool for attracting good and sustainable investment. Emerging markets have a role to innovate, and when we talk about innovation and emerging markets, we certainly have to think about sustainable energy, because if there's one place where really emerging markets have led the way in terms of innovation, it's with sustainable energy, which Undersecretary Junckella has so powerfully explained to us. So without further ado, I will wrap this up. Please give a hand to all these very, very great panelists. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks to our global leaders for this fantastic and very interesting debate. And now let's watch a short video about the Annual Investment Meeting 2015.
Under the wise tutelage of two visionary leaders, the United Arab Emirates were created in 1971. The late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan and the late Sheikh Rashid bin Said Al Maktoum drove the growth of the country from a quiet fishing port and trade hub to the international industrial, financial, and technological powerhouse that it has become today. These accomplishments were nurtured and extended in large part under the rule and guidance of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai, whose ambition pushed Dubai to the forefront of modern economic and social achievements. This was supported by smart foreign direct investment into growing sectors of the economy to promote partnerships with international brands. To serve this plan, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed extended his patronage to the Annual Investment Meeting, an annual conference now in its 5th year that aims to develop and enhance foreign direct investment to emerging and foreign countries. With a strategic location forming a crossroads between Europe, Africa, and Asia, Dubai is uniquely positioned to serve as the gateway to the world's most vibrant and dynamic economies, extending all the way to North and South America. With solid global partnerships tied to large pipelines of capital and liquidity, Dubai provides the market with clear and valuable insights as to the direction of investor appetite. More than just a platform, Dubai has become a compass for international investments. This year's theme of sustainable development through FDI-induced innovation and technology transfer will examine sustainable development achievements that were made possible by foreign direct investment into UAE projects. Also examine how technology transfer has helped many economies in the region share intellectual capital across borders with other established territories for mutual benefit. The key aspect of this year's AIM is to examine how investing in knowledge transfer and innovation can drive sustainable development. By harnessing the most advanced scientific models worldwide and pushing research and development, training and education into new and exciting directions, sustainable methods of development are accessible to all economies. All that is required is a platform through which to discover these scientific models and set up vital partnerships for countries to leap forward to face the challenge. The event provides opportunities to arrange bilateral meetings with high-level members of international governments, major industry leaders, and senior corporate directors. AIM 2015 offers the perfect networking platform to lay the ground for solid international partnerships. The Dubai government's Achievements exhibition, held for the third time at the AIM, will highlight the services, projects and accomplishments of all Dubai government entities that led to excellence and innovation. Delegates will have the opportunity to meet and gain experience from Dubai government members through a dedicated tour, during which AIM key sponsors will also be accessible. At this year's 5th edition of the annual investment meeting, several important speakers from all over the world will share insights into how best to improve our social and economic future.
Focused workshops will take place throughout the event.
Finally, AIM 2015 will also hand out investment awards to recognize the outstanding work of some of the world's most effective investment promotion agencies. As it looks to the future, the AIM will grow into the region's most important FDI-focused event, linking investors with government representatives from all over the world to provide the very best of FDI opportunities to all rapidly growing economies globally. The annual investment meeting.
Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, official delegation representatives, ladies and gentlemen. The annual investment meeting is the world's leading focused event on foreign direct investment, organized by the UAE Ministry of Economy under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai. Distinguished guests, please welcome His Excellency Engineer Sultan bin Saeed Al Mansouri, UAE Minister of Economy, to the stage for his welcome speech. Please give him a big round of applause.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي الوزراء ورؤساء الوفود المشاركة، أصحاب السعادة السفراء ووكلاء الوزارات، الأخوات والأخوة المشاركين في ملتقى الاستثمار السنوي الخامس، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بالأصالة عن نفسي وبالنيابة عن حكومة دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة ممثلة بوزارة الاقتصاد، أرحب بكم في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأثمن مشاركتكم القيمة في أعمال الدورة الخامسة لملتقى الاستثمار السنوي. إننا نلتقي اليوم في ظل مجموعة من التطورات العالمية المؤثرة على اقتصاديات العالم، أهمها ما يتعلق بانخفاض أسعار النفط أو تذبذب أسعار العملات، والتي أثرت بلا شك في مختلف الاقتصادات العالمية بنسبة وبطرق أيضاً مختلفة، وعملت على إعادة رسم خارطة الأولويات للعديد من حكومات العالم. وتشير آخر التقديرات صندوق النقد الدولي إلى توقعات بنمو معتدل للاقتصاد العالمي من 3.3% في 2014 إلى 3.5% في العام 2015، كما ومن المتوقع أن يستمر بالارتفاع المعتدل في العام القادم 2016. وانسجاماً مع وضع النمو على مستوى الاقتصاد العالمي، فمن المتوقع أن تستمر معدلات النمو الإيجابية للاقتصاد الوطني لدولة الإمارات بالرغم من الانخفاض الحاصل في أسعار النفط العالمية، حيث باتت الإمارات اليوم أقل اعتماداً على الموارد النفطية كمصدر الإيرادات، مع أنها لا زالت تمثل جزءاً مهماً من اقتصادنا الوطني. ومع ذلك فقد أعلنت حكومتنا مراراً بأننا نستهدف تخفيض الاعتماد على المدخول النفطي إلى مستويات دون 20% من مجمل الناتج الوطني خلال السنوات القادمة. الأخوات والأخوة الحضور، لقد سجلت دولة الإمارات معدلات نمو قياسية بفضل السياسات الاقتصادية الناجحة التي انتهجتها الحكومة الاتحادية على قاعدة التنويع الاقتصادي والتنمية الاقتصادية المستدامة والهادفة لتطوير مختلف القطاعات، حيث ارتقى حجم الناتج المحلي الإجمالي لأكثر من 236 ضعفاً خلال السنوات 43 من عمر الاتحاد. بدأنا في العام 1971 ب 6.5 مليار درهم ليصل إلى أكثر من 1540 مليار درهم مع نهاية العام 2014، يعني 400 مليار دولار في السنة هو الناتج المحلي لدولة الإمارات. في حين كان النفط يمثل أكثر من 90% من مجمل الناتج الوطني في السبعينات، فقد ارتفعت مساهمة القطاعات غير النفطية في الناتج المحلي الإجمالي لتصل إلى 69% مع نهاية العام 2014، مبقية أكثر من الثلث للموارد النفطية. وبالحديث عن التقدم الذي تشهده دولة الإمارات، فإن مجال الاستثمارات الأجنبية المباشرة يأخذ موقعاً متميزاً في منظومة النجاح، فقد استطاعت دولة الإمارات أن تتصدر المشهد كوجهة مفضلة للاستثمارات الأجنبية، وحلت المرتبة الأولى عربياً و22 عالمياً في مؤشر الاستثمار العالمي لعام 2015. كما تجاوز مجمل حجم الاستثمارات الأجنبية في الإمارات حاجز 100 مليار دولار في العام الماضي، وسجلت دولة الإمارات نمواً مميزاً في حجم الاستثمارات الأجنبية المباشرة الواردة إليها، حيث تجاوز 13 مليار دولار بنسبة نمو بلغت نحو 25%. السيدات والسادة، كما نعلم جميعاً فإن الاستثمار الأجنبي المباشر له منافع مباشرة كتوفر رؤوس الأموال للعديد من المشاريع وإيجاد فرص عمل جديدة في مختلف القطاعات، والتي بدورها ترفع إيرادات الحكومة كما تسهم في زيادة مخزون النقد الأجنبي. إلا أن التأثير الحقيقي للاستثمار الأجنبي المباشر على التنمية الاقتصادية يأتي من المنافع غير المباشرة أو الآثار الإيجابية التي تأتي بها هذه الاستثمارات، كنقل التكنولوجيا والخبرات العملية والخبرات الإدارية والتنظيمية، علاوة على تشجيع المنافسة والابتكار. وهذا يقودنا إلى موضوع ملتقى الاستثمار السنوي لهذا العام، وهو التنمية المستدامة من خلال الاستثمار الأجنبي المباشر الذي يحث على الابتكار ونقل التكنولوجيا، وهو العنوان الرئيسي والعريض الذي يتماشى مع استراتيجية دولة الإمارات لبناء اقتصاد معرفي مستدام يرتكز على الإبداع والابتكار. إن حكومة دولة الإمارات تعي تماماً أهمية الانتقال إلى اقتصاد المعرفة، وفي هذا الإطار فقد وضعت الاستثمارات في التعليم والتكنولوجيا والبحوث على رأس قائمة أولوياتها، وهي استثمارات تنسجم مع رؤية الإمارات الطموحة للعام 2021 وأجندتها الوطنية للنمو المستدام والتنافسية. الحضور الكريم، إننا وبموجب رؤية الإمارات 2021 وأجندتها الوطنية نستهدف وصول نسبة تدفقات الاستثمار الأجنبي إلى الإمارات بما يعادل حوالي 5% من الناتج المحلي الإجمالي، وأن تنجح الدولة في تحقيق المرتبة الأولى في مؤشر سهولة ممارسة الأعمال والترتيب العاشر في مؤشر التنافسية العالمي. واليوم نقول بأن دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة تعد بيئة استثمارية متميزة وجاذبة بشهادة كافة المستثمرين الأجانب من مقيمين وزوار، ولكننا لن نكتفي بالجاذبية الراهنة، بل نسعى إلى تحسين المناخ الاستثماري في إطار بيئة مدعومة بالتشريعات والقوانين المتقدمة. وفي هذا الإطار فقد انتهينا من العمل على صياغة قانون اتحادي جديد للاستثمار الأجنبي المباشر تصل من خلاله الملكية الأجنبية إلى نسبة 100% ببعض الأنشطة والقطاعات التي تخدم النمو الاقتصادي وتدعم تنوعه. كما يوجد حالياً عدة قوانين اتحادية مختلفة تم الانتهاء منها، أهمها قد يكون قانون الشركات أو بعضها في قيد الإعداد، قانون التحكيم التجاري، وكذلك مؤخراً أطلقت الوزارة دليل حوكمة الشركات، والذي سيسهم في مساعدة آلاف الشركات على الاستمرار بالتقدم والنجاح. وعلاوة على ذلك فإن حكومتنا ملتزمة بقوة بخفض العقبات الروتينية أمام المستثمرين الأجانب، ليس بهدف أن تصبح دولة الإمارات إحدى أكثر الاقتصادات تنافسية في المنطقة وحسب، بل لتكون إحدى أكثر الاقتصاديات تنافسية على مستوى العالم. السادة الحضور، ختاماً، وحيث أن وزارة الاقتصاد هي المشرفة على تنظيم هذا الحدث، فإنني أعبر لكم جميعاً عن عظيم تقديري لحضوركم واستمرار ثقتكم في أن تكونوا شركاء لنا في هذا الحدث الناجح عاماً تلو الآخر، متمنين أن تحقق زيارتكم لدولة الإمارات النتائج المرجوة، وأن يكون هذا الحدث على مستوى تطلعاتكم وطموحاتكم. أشكركم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your speech. We are very honored in the 5th edition of the annual investment meeting to have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as the country of honor. And now let's watch together a short video of the country of honor, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Lucrative investment opportunities, sustainable development, an innovative investment environment, unmatched incentives, excellent public services. The benefits of investment in Saudi Arabia, a nation developing at a remarkable pace, establishing in a few decades a rich legacy that competes with nations that are hundreds of years older, a country that possesses all the requirements of economic innovation, stepping ahead of nations that came before it through successful strategic planning and perseverance, carving for itself a unique position on the global economic forefront, ranking third among the 20 most economically empowered nations in the world in terms of growth, and establishing one of the most vibrant economic environments in the Middle East. Only in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The prosperity of the Saudi economy and its continued development was not a mere stroke of luck, but rather a combination of success factors, including a strategic geographical location that allows the nation to serve as the crossroads between East and West, an area that extends over 2.25 million square kilometers, various natural resources, and a cultural legacy that has made it a coveted destination for millions around the globe. This in addition to the fact that 60% of its population is comprised of youth, who contribute to productivity and sustainable strategic planning. Not to mention the nation's unparalleled geopolitical stability that has played a central role in its rapid socio-economic development. The growth of foreign investments in Saudi Arabia is a success story of transformation in which the nation has become a global investment hub and one of the most attractive investment environments in the Middle East. Within the span of a few years, foreign investments in the kingdom have multiplied fivefold. Today, efforts are intensifying to attract and develop more value-adding investments that contribute to the development of strategic sectors and the cultivation of a knowledge-based economy driven by innovation across multiple sectors, including healthcare, transportation, information and communication technologies, energy, and tourism. The Saudi Arabian General Investment Authority, in collaboration with public regulatory authorities, has been working tirelessly to create a world-class investment environment, unlocking the kingdom's potential while offering new investment opportunities that are a win to the investors and a win to the kingdom's diversification. Fostering effective public-private partnerships in hopes of securing an even more prosperous future. Specialized industrial and economic zones, research and education institutions, an advanced transportation infrastructure, generous government investments in continually expanding services, progressive policies, ambitious human development projects, initiatives to automate all public services and develop legal facilities. All geared towards hosting cutting-edge technologies managed by bright young minds in collaboration with the most progressive nations. This is how we see the future, through the lens of true sustainable development.
Thank Thank you for the fantastic video from the City of Honor, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Distinguished guests, please welcome His Royal Highness Prince Saud bin Khalid Al Faisal, Executive Director of Investment Policies and Regulations in Saudi Arabia General Investment Authority. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. معالي المهندس سلطان بن سعيد المنصوري وزير الاقتصاد، أصحاب المعالي الوزراء، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسرني أن أتقدم بالشكر لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة حكومة وشعبا، ولوزارة الاقتصاد على تنظيم هذه الملتقى مشكورة، وعلى اختيار المملكة العربية السعودية ضيفا للشرف للدورة الخامسة للملتقى. الحضور الكريم، انطلاقا من الرؤية المشتركة التي تجمع دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي، أصبحت تعيش هذه الدول تقدما وازدهارا اقتصاديا كبيرا ودرجة عالية من التكامل، حيث زالت كثير من القيود والتدابير التي تحد من تدفق الاستثمارات والتجارة البينية. ففي الرياض مثلا لا نجد اختلافا أو تمييزا بين رؤوس الأموال أو الأشخاص الاعتباريين القادمين من جدة أو من دبي أو الدوحة أو مسقط أو الكويت أو البحرين. وبهذا نشطت الحركة التجارية، وتتكامل سلاسل القيم المضافة بين كافة دول المنطقة بشكل أسهم في دعم النمو الاقتصادي وزيادة التوظيف وتحقيق التنوع الاقتصادي، مما جعل دولنا تلعب دورا بارزا في التأثير على الخريطة الاقتصادية العالمية. وفي ظل هذا التنظيم الاقتصادي بين دول مجلس التعاون، نجد على سبيل المثال عمق الترابط والانسجام بين العلاقات الاقتصادية والاستثمارية بين المملكة العربية السعودية ودولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، حيث حققت في عقود قليلة نهضة تنموية سريعة، ونتيجة لعلاقات الأخوة الراسخة بين قيادتي وشعبي البلدين الشقيقين، فإن العلاقات الاقتصادية والاستثمارية والتجارية بينهما هي من أقوى وأرسخ العلاقات بين الدول في العالم. وقد ساهمت هذه العلاقة في تحقيق الانسجام والتوافق حول كثير من المواقف والقرارات على أسس ثابتة وراسخة. الإمارات هي من أهم الشركاء لنا في المنطقة، حيث تجاوز التبادل التجاري بين البلدين 19 مليار ريال دولار للعام الماضي، ما يمثل نصف حجم التبادل التجاري بين دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي. وفي المقابل نجد أن حجم الاستثمارات السعودية في الإمارات وصلت إلى حوالي 10 مليار دولار من واقع أكثر من 2360 شركة سعودية. كما تأتي دولة الإمارات في مقدمة الدول المستثمرة في المملكة باستثمارات تتجاوز 9 مليار دولار في قطاعات عدة أبرزها الصناعات والخدمات. والجدير بالذكر أن متوسط عدد الرحلات بين الإمارات العربية المتحدة والمملكة هو 65.5 رحلة يومياً. كما أننا نتوقع مزيداً من النمو للأنشطة الاستثمارية والاقتصادية في المرحلة القادمة بعد الإنجاز الضخم الذي حققته الإمارات الشقيقة باستضافتها للمعرض العالمي إكسبو 2020، والذي يمثل فرصاً واعدة وثمينة ليس للإمارات فحسب بل لكافة دول المجلس. ويشارك معرض استثمر في السعودية ليمثل أكبر اقتصاد عربي، حيث أن المملكة العربية السعودية عضو في مجموعة 20 أكبر اقتصاد في العالم الG20، وقد بلغ الناتج الإجمالي المحلي للمملكة 752 مليار دولار لعام 2014، والذي انخفض فيه الدين الحكومي العام إلى أقل من 2% من الناتج الإجمالي المحلي، وبذلك تكون المملكة من أقل دول العالم نسبة في الدين العام. كما بلغ إجمالي أرصدة الاستثمارات الأجنبية المباشرة حوالي 208 مليار دولار لعام 2014، وتحتل المملكة المركز الرابع عالمياً من حيث قوة الاقتصاد الكلي وفقاً لتقرير التنافسية الدولي. الحضور الكريم، أن المملكة تنعم باستقرار سياسي واقتصادي فريدين، وفرص استثمارية مجزئة للمستثمرين في عدد من القطاعات والمناطق الواعدة، وترحب كل الترحيب باستثمارات الشركات الرائدة التي تسهم في نقل التقنية وتعزيز الابتكار وخلق الوظائف، مع تدريب وتأهيل أبناء وبنات الوطن للاستفادة منها في تنويع الاقتصاد الوطني. وتحتل المملكة المركز الثالث عالميا في مؤشر دفع الضرائب وفقا لتقرير البنك الدولي حول سهولة أداء الأعمال لعام 2014. ويتمتع المستثمرون بالعديد من الحوافز مثل تمويل صندوق التنمية الصناعي للمشاريع الصناعية بما يصل إلى 50% من تكلفة المشروع ترتفع إلى 75% في المناطق الواعدة، مع فترة سداد تصل إلى 20 سنة، ويصل مبلغ القرض إلى 240 مليون دولار يرتفع إلى 320 مليون دولار في المناطق الواعدة. يصاحب هذه الحوافز تطويرا مستمرا للأنظمة والتشريعات وتسهيلا للإجراءات وسعيا حثيثا لإزالة المعوقات التي تواجه المستثمرين ضمن عمل مؤسسي لتحسين بيئة وتطوير فرص الاستثمار، بما يحقق شراكة فاعلة ما بين القطاع الخاص والعام. وقد أطلقت الهيئة العامة للاستثمار مسارا مميزا يتم من خلاله إنهاء إجراءات الشركات الأجنبية المستهدفة مع الالتزام بإصدار التراخيص خلال 3 أيام عمل. الحضور الكريم، لقد ارتفع الإنفاق الحكومي العام في المملكة إلى حوالي 300 مليار دولار في عام 2014، ومن الطبيعي أن يرتبط بذلك نشاطا اقتصاديا ضخما وفرصا استثمارية كبرى. وتقوم المملكة بإعداد خطة استثمارية موحدة لتأسيس كيانات استثمارية لتحقيق تنمية مستدامة بالتعاون بين الهيئة العامة للاستثمار والجهات الحكومية ذات العلاقة. ويتلخص هذا التوجه بإعداد خطة موحدة للاستثمار لكل قطاع استثماري تحدد فيه آليات ومعايير لإحلال الواردات وتمكين الاستثمارات بصورة متكاملة لجعل هذه القطاعات ذات تنافسية عالية ورافدا من روافد الاقتصاد. ففي قطاع الرعاية الصحية مثلا تنفق المملكة حوالي 20 مليار ريال سنويا، يمثل الإنفاق على الواردات من أجهزة ومستحضرات وأدوية طبية حوالي 41% من هذا المبلغ. وحددت الخطة الاستثمارية للرعاية الصحية التي أعدتها وزارة الصحة بالتعاون مع الهيئة العامة للاستثمار ما يزيد عن 40 فرصة استثمارية واعدة بقيمة 71 مليار دولار، وتشمل هذه الفرص تصنيع الأجهزة والمعدات الطبية والأدوات واللقاحات، وإنشاء وإدارة المستشفيات ومراكز الرعاية الصحية الآلية والمختبرات والأبحاث، معاهد التدريب، الصحة الإلكترونية والتمويل والتأمين الصحي. وحددت خطة الاستثمار في قطاع النقل التي أعدتها وزارة النقل بالتعاون مع الهيئة 36 فرصة استثمارية واعدة حتى الآن، تصل قيمة استثماراتها نحو 25 مليار دولار، وتشمل هذه الفرص تصنيع الحافلات وعربات القطارات وقطع الغيار، وتقديم خدمات الدعم الفني والتقني في أعمال إنشاء البنية التحتية والتشغيل والصيانة والتدريب. كما أن حجم سوق المعدات الصناعية وقطع الغيار يتجاوز 15 مليار دولار، وقد تم تحديد 3 فئات من المعدات الصناعية للتصنيع محليا، وهي المضخات والصمامات والمكابس الصناعية. وفي الختام لا يسعني إلا أن أكرر شكري لصاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن راشد المكتوم نائب رئيس الدولة رئيس مجلس الوزراء حاكم دبي على رعايته لهذا المنتدى، والشكر للمنظمين على التنظيم المتميز، ولكم أنتم أيها الحضور الكريم على إتاحة الفرصة لي للحديث إليكم، ونتطلع إلى نجاح الملتقى والإسهام في زيادة التعاون بين الدول المشاركة، والله الموفق، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, for your very interesting speech. And now I'd like to introduce the UAE International Investment Council. The council is formed by a decree from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, UAE Vice President, Prime Minister, and the ruler of Dubai. The council aims to coordinate between the UAE companies investing abroad in order to exchange experience and enhance their presence internationally. The council is formed by the top UAE organizations, and we would like to introduce the council members. Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Abu Dhabi Investment Company, ADIC, Abu Dhabi National Energy Company, TAQA, Al Fahim Group, Buruj Private Limited, DP World, Emirates Telecommunication Cooperation, Etisalat, Amar Properties, General Civil Aviation Authority, Majid Al Futtaim Group, Mubadala, and Thani Investments. And now we would like to invite all the council members to come to the stage for a group photo. And I'd like to also invite His Excellency Engineer Sultan bin Saeed Al Mansouri to join us all on stage for a group photo. Please make your way to the stage for the group photo. Thank you. Your Highness, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, official delegation representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending the annual investment meeting opening ceremony. Now is the time, the most important time, to visit the annual investment meeting exhibition and Dubai government exhibition, which will give you a great and fantastic opportunity to discover further investment opportunities. So I'd like to invite you all to visit the exhibition from hall number 7. Once again, it's been fantastic being with you here today. Thank you very much for joining us and have a great day.